Have you ever paused and truly wondered why? Why does God, again and again, choose the most unexpected people to rewrite the course of history? Why does he raise up quiet wisdom against loud, arrogant foolishness? Why, in a world obsessed with power and noise, does God so often work through the overlooked, the underestimated, the unheard? Today, I want to invite you into a story, one rarely preached from pulpits, seldom highlighted in sermons, a story hidden beneath the pages of kings and warriors, a story tucked away in the shadows of proud men making reckless decisions. It's not a tale of grand battles or mighty armies. It's not a tale of prophets calling fire down from heaven. No, it's the story of a woman whose name is barely remembered by many, yet whose wisdom shaped the destiny of a future king. Her name was Abigail, and her story is not just about survival. It's about the kind of courage that speaks when silence would be safer, the kind of faith that acts when fear says run, the kind of wisdom God honors, even when no one else is listening. Stay with me, because through Abigail's story, you'll discover something powerful. God sees. He sees when others dismiss you. He hears the wisdom others ignore. And he honors those who walk in his ways, even when the whole world seems blind to it. This is more than history. It's a living truth. And by the end, you'll see why. And so, the story begins. Not in a palace, not on a battlefield, but on the sunburnt hills of ancient Israel, with a man who had everything except wisdom. His name was Nabal, a man of vast wealth. He owned lands that stretched beyond what the eye could see, fields scattered with sheep, tended by servants who feared his temper more than they respected his name. But what he possessed in fortune, he lacked entirely in virtue. Even his name, Nabal, carried a bitter truth, fool, and he wore that name like a crown. Arrogant, harsh, unkind, a man blind to his own pride, deaf to reason, and utterly intoxicated by his own sense of importance. Yet beneath his roof was a treasure he did not deserve, a woman whose worth far outweighed his flocks or fortune. Abigail. Her beauty wasn't loud. It was steady, quiet, deep, the kind of beauty shaped by wisdom, sharpened by discernment, anchored by faith. She had learned how to walk carefully through the minefield of her husband's temper, how to speak softly in a house ruled by harshness. But beyond Nabal's lands, in the wilderness, another man was rising. David, not yet crowned king, still a fugitive, still hunted by Saul's madness and jealousy. But even in his exile, God's hand rested upon him, and his men, rough, weary, loyal, had quietly shielded Nabal's shepherds. Night after night, day after day, they had protected his flocks from raiders, thieves, wild beasts. David asked for nothing in return, until harvest time, when it was custom, when it was right, to share generosity with those who had safeguarded your prosperity. And so David sent word, a humble request from a future king still wearing a fugitive's cloak. Peace to you, peace to your house. We ask only for your kindness, whatever you can spare. Peace to all you have. We guarded your men, but Nabal? He didn't just refuse. He sneered. He mocked. He laughed. Who is this David? A runaway, a rebel, a nobody. Why should I waste my bread on him? One man's foolish words would soon ignite a fire far bigger than he could ever imagine. Because David wasn't just another shepherd. He was God's anointed. And Nabal had just made himself an enemy he could not afford and change everything. But God was already moving, already preparing the answer, already positioning Abigail for the moment that would define her courage. Stay with me. The story is only just beginning. The wind carried the bitter news across the wilderness, straight into David's ears. When he heard Nabal's cruel laughter, his patience fractured, snapped like a brittle reed underfoot. In that instant, the shepherd turned fugitive became a warrior fueled by righteous anger. He turned to his men, eyes blazing with the intensity of a rising storm. "Arm yourselves. Strap on your swords." There was no hesitation in their ranks. They had followed David through deserts and dangers alike. Now they rose as one, a silent vow in their hearts: justice or death. "By dawn," David declared, "not one male in Nabal's household will be left alive." The camp crackled to life. Torches were readied. Swords were checked. Spears were held aloft like thunder, waiting to strike. As they set out under the moon's pale watch, each footstep echoed with the promise of vengeance. The wilderness itself seemed to hold its breath, anticipating the violence to come. Yet amid the flickering torchlight, no one sensed the peril approaching Nabal's estate. No one warned the foolish man of the bloodlust marching toward his gates. Except one person, a woman whose name meant peace, yet whose spirit was about to ignite hope where only despair loomed. A woman who would stand between fury and folly, and whose courage would shine brightest against the darkness of that night. Stay close, Abigail is about to step into the arena of wrath, and what she does next will change the course of every life on both sides of that valley. In the dead of night, as torches danced across the dust, a breathless servant burst through the gates of Nabal's household. He spoke in ragged gasps, the insults hurled by his master, the thunder of David's wrath, the cold steel of swords being sharpened for bloodshed. But Abigail wise, Abigail did not falter. She felt the weight of every moment, yet she refused to surrender to panic. There were no tears, no pleas of why me, only a solemn calm that radiated from her soul, as if she already knew that every second counted. She moved with purpose. First, she summoned her servants. Together, they filled baskets with the finest provisions. 1. Fresh-baked bread, still warm from the oven, its aroma promising comfort even in chaos. 2. Sweet wine, shimmering like garnet in the torchlight, a gift to soothe the fiercest heart. And 3. Ripe figs and honeyed cakes, treasures of the harvest meant to honor and appease. With swift efficiency, she loaded the donkeys, each laden with hope and reconciliation. Then she sent her men on ahead, urging them to ride quickly faster than the drumbeat of approaching feet. And at the last moment, alone, she mounted her own steed. Imagine her courage, a lone figure drifting through the shadows, entering the path of an army poised for violence. One small woman standing between a proud fool and a rising king's fury. No armor but her faith, no weapons but her words. As dawn's first light peeked over the hills, Abigail's silhouette appeared on the road, her gifts glinting in the morning sun, her heart resolute. In that fragile silence, she carried the weight of two worlds: the destruction her husband had dared to invite, and the mercy David might yet be persuaded to show. This was the moment where fear bowed to wisdom, where a single act of brave compassion would decide the fate of many. Picture the scene: the wilderness trembling beneath the weight of marching feet, dust swirling in the horizon like smoke before a fire. David's men, hardened, fierce, eyes burning with the hunger for revenge, their swords drawn, their hearts set. Nothing would stop them now, except for one figure, one woman, alone, riding steadily into the storm. No armor, no shield, no army at her back, only faith, and the kind of wisdom this world rarely recognizes until it's too late. She dismounted in the path of danger, before the very man whose wrath threatened to devour her household. And there, in the dust and silence of a moment thick with destiny, she did something no sword could ever achieve. She bowed, face to the earth, not out of fear, but out of honor, not to flatter, but to disarm. And then she spoke words wrapped in courage, humility, and heavenly wisdom, words that would alter the course of history. "My lord, Let this blame fall on me. Please forgive my husband's offense. He is a fool, as his name declares. But you are chosen by the Lord. Do not stain your hands with needless blood. Leave this in God's hands, and he will fight your battles. A hush fell, an army of men stilled, not by force, but by truth. For in that moment, her words cut deeper than blades. Her wisdom pierced through rage like light through darkness. She spoke not only to David's ears, but to his soul. And David, once driven by fury, felt his anger dissolve into something far greater, humility. "Blessed be the Lord who sent you to me this day," he said, his voice no longer sharp with wrath, but softened by awe. "Blessed be your wisdom, for you have kept me from bloodshed." Just like that, the swords were lowered, the march was halted. No blood was spilled that day, because one woman chose to believe that wisdom was stronger than vengeance. Because Abigail stepped forward when anyone else would have turned away. And through her, we see again, he exalts the humble. He fights for those who trust in him. God honors wisdom, but the story isn't over yet. So what does this story truly teach us? What echoes from Abigail's courage into our lives today? It shows us that sometimes the greatest battles are not fought with swords or armies. They're fought and won with wisdom, with patience, with words carefully chosen, with courage wrapped in humility. It shows us that one person's bravery, even when unseen by the world, can stop disaster in its tracks. That God honors those who speak peace, even when the world demands anger. That a single faithful heart, standing between pride and destruction, can change the course of history. Look at Abigail again. She wasn't strong by any earthly measure. No sword hung at her side, no army marched behind her, no crown rested on her brow. What she had was greater. She had discernment, the rare wisdom to see beyond the moment. She had humility, the strength to bow when others would have fought. She had faith, quiet but unshakable, in a God who sees what others overlook, who hears what others dismiss, who rewards righteousness in his perfect time. And in the end, God did fight for her, not with thunder, not with armies, but with justice, with mercy, with favor. David walked away that day with his hands clean, and Abigail, her name would be remembered not as the wife of a fool, but as a woman of wisdom, a woman God honored, a woman who reminds us all, you don't need a sword to change the world, who lived by pride and foolishness, blind to the danger his arrogance invited. You just need faith in the one who holds it. And what of Nabal? What became of the man who mocked God's anointed when he finally heard what had nearly happened? When he realized how close he had come to destruction, his heart failed him. Fear gripped his soul, and 10 days later, the justice he thought would never come did. God struck him down, not by David's sword, not by human hands, but by his own righteous judgment, because God writes his own justice, perfectly, completely, without fail. And David? David did not forget the woman who had stood alone between his anger and Nabal's ruin. He remembered her courage, her humility, her wisdom, her beauty, and most of all, her faith. He sent for her, and in time, he made her his wife. From the shadows of obscurity, from the house of a fool, God lifted Abigail into the house of a future king. The woman no one saw, the woman the world overlooked, the woman who chose faith over fear, was honored by God himself, because this is who our God is. He sees what others ignore. He honors what others despise. He lifts up the humble, and he weaves his justice in ways we could never imagine. And that is the true end of this story, but not the end of its lesson, because Abigail's story still speaks today. And in a world full of loud fools and reckless anger, God is still looking for those who choose wisdom, who choose peace, who trust him to fight their battles. And so, we reach the end of Abigail's story, but maybe not the end of yours. Because perhaps today, you feel small, trapped beneath the weight of someone else's pride, overlooked for your quiet wisdom, unseen, unheard, standing in the shadows, while the world applauds the loud, the reckless, the foolish. But hear this truth, the same truth Abigail's story whispers through the centuries. God sees you. He sees your quiet faithfulness. He sees the wisdom you carry when no one else listens. He honors those who choose his ways, even when the world mocks, misunderstands, or walks away. You may not carry a sword. You may not lead an army. You may not have titles or recognition. But like Abigail, your courage, your discernment, your faith, they matter. They protect more than you know. They can stop destruction in its tracks. They can change lives in ways you may never fully see. Because God's justice is not always loud. Sometimes it's written quietly in the hearts of those who trust him. And his rewards reach far beyond what this world offers. If this story moved you, the faithful, the wise, if it reminded you that God honors the unseen, then I invite you, like this video. God is writing something far greater than we can imagine. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you won't miss the next story. Stories that remind us again and again that even in the quiet places. And tell me in the comments, what did this story awaken in you? How has God met you in seasons where you felt unseen, unheard, or overlooked? Your story matters too. God honors. And God is never done writing your story. Thank you for watching. Remember, God sees. We'll see you in the next one.